This is Jarrod Horak for the RunawayHorse.com. This is my Breeders' Cup Saturday preview video. I'm actually going to do a part 1 and a part 2. This will be part 1, and then later in the week I'll be posting part 2 for my Breeders' Cup Saturday video preview. I already posted Breeders' Cup Friday preview video on my YouTube channel earlier this week, so check that out if you're interested. Now, if you're interested in my full card analysis, that annual full card for my 2-day Breeders' Cups that I've been covering since 1998. Now, the 2022 full cards from Keeneland, Friday, November 4th, Saturday, November 5th, will be available at therunawayhorse.com on my sales page, Breeders' Cup Week. Now, I'll be offering a pre-sale for those full cards starting next week. So head on over to therunawayhorse.com if you're interested in my Breeders' Cup full card analysis. Now, I'm going to toss up on the screen right now some examples of what you will be getting for those two-day Breeders' Cup full cards. And right now, I'll just show from last year. We'll toss the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile up there. That was the 6th race at Del Mar last year. As you can see, my primary and my secondary contenders. Silver State was my primary contender. Life is Good, my other primary contender. And then my secondary contenders, Ginobili and 8 Rings. Now, another horse that I liked, a long shot underneath, was a local horse, Restrained Vengeance, and I did get him underneath in some trifectas, superfectas, and the Super High Five. And I did give out that superfecta last year in that Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, and Restrained Vengeance coming in helped that pay out nicely. Now, Life is Good ended up winning. Silver State disappointed. Ginobili ran a decent race, 8 Rings as well. But like I said, the key to that race was getting Restrained Vengeance, that long shot, in the money. Now, in the next section, before I get to that, the wagers that I suggest for the Breeders' Cup races, I always suggest Win, Exacta, Trifecta, and Superfecta, and toss in some Super High Five tickets as well. Now, the trend section, where I go through some of the history of the Breeders' Cup races. For this example, the Dirt Mile, I'll look at the previous winners. I'll see the running styles that they use, and some of the races that they came out of, looking at winning connections, and all of those kind of angles that I put in the trends section. And then the horse comment section, for each of the Breeders' Cup races, I go through and I have a comment for each of the entrants in every Breeders' Cup race. And so that is offered as well. And then the next section that I offer, I have rolling double and pick 3 contenders in order of preference, and then the rolling double and pick 3 contenders tickets. For those tickets, I suggest for the tickets keying my top choice with the other contenders in the other races in those rolling doubles and pick 3s. Now, I did have the pick 4 starting with race 4 last year, the race 4 through 7, pick 4 for that Breeders' Cup Saturday, and that one paid over $1,000 for $2. So hopefully we'll have even more success this year for Breeders' Cup Saturday than we did last year, but we had a pretty good day for Breeders' Cup Friday and Saturday this year, but I'm hoping to do even better this year. Now I'll go through some of the Breeders' Cup races for Breeders' Cup Saturday for 2022, and I'll talk about some of the trends and things to look for in those races. Now, the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint at 7 furlongs will be the first race that I talk about, and last year's winner was Cece. Went off at 6-1, and she was my value top choice in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, and that helped me give out a nice, as I mentioned, that pick 4 beginning with Cece that paid over $1,000 for $2. So Cece was my value top choice last year. She was exiting a win in the Chillingworth Stakes at Santa Anita Park, and then she comes away with a win in that race again this year. So she's won that Chillingworth back-to-back years. She won the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, and she's going to be a contender as she tries to repeat her title. So that Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint is certainly going to be a race at 7 furlongs. That's at specialty distance. And at Keeneland, you would expect, unless there's going to be a pace meltdown, you would expect that horses which show early pressing, tactical type speed will probably do well in a race like the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. Now, Joao Rosario has won this race twice in the past. We'll have to see where he ends up. Now, I'll go through more after we get the pre-entries that come in next week. I'll go through and I'll talk more about some of the horses that are going to be entered in these races. But until the pre-entries come out, we're not quite sure which horses will be pre-entered in which races. Now, the next race for the Breeders' Cup that I'll talk about for Breeders' Cup Saturday for 2022, the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Now, it's run at different distances depending on which venue hosts the Breeders' Cup. It's at Keeneland this year, so it will be at 5.5 furlongs on the turf course at Keeneland. Now, last year, Golden Pal, he won the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, and he's back to defend his title in 2022 for trainer Wesley Ward. And he handles that Keeneland turf course, and he's one that certainly would be a top contender if he goes in that Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Now, overseas runners, they typically don't do well in the turf sprint, but in the Breeders' Cup, when it was last at Keeneland in 2020, Glass Slippers invaded from France and was able to win that turf sprint at Keeneland. Now, 2 horses have repeated in this race. Ms. Direction in 2012 and 13 on the downhill course at Santa Anita Park. She was a repeat winner. And then Stormy Liberal for trainer Peter Miller in 2017 at Del Mar and 2018 at Churchill Downs. And as I said, Golden Pal is attempting to repeat this year. Now, the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. This will be a 2-turn mile at Keeneland. This race started in 2007, so it's not as old as some of the other Breeders' Cup races that date back to 1984. Now, Life is Good last year, I mentioned the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. I just got out there, got to the front, and just kept on going. And so that was a nice effort for Life is Good last year. And speed can be dangerous in this race because the last 4 winners of the Dirt Mile went wire to wire. And then another trait that the Dirt Mile winners share is typically they have run and have had success in 2-turn races longer than 1 mile. So this race really isn't a race for sprinters. The 6 furlong type horses stretching out in distance don't typically do well. This is a race where horses could have good sprint form, but they've done well in races longer than 1 mile as well. So keep an eye on that. And then, as I said, speed can be dangerous. The Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf will be the next race that I talk about here. And this is another race that, depending on the venue, it can be run at different distances. It's been run at a 1 1/8, a 1 3/16, a 1 1/4, a 1 3/8. This year, it's going to be run at 9.5 furlongs, a 1 3/16 on the turf course. Now, the overseas shippers have won this race 5 of the last 6 years. And if you go back to 2012, 5 overseas runners have won, and 4 North American horses have won. Now, of the 4 North American-based runners, Chad Brown trained all of them. So looking at all that data, it looks like either a Chad Brown trainee will win the Filly and Mare Turf or a horse shipping in from overseas. And then the final race I'll talk about in this video will be the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Now, last year was a big upset. We saw, it wasn't a huge upset, but Aloha West rallied. The pace was quick and was able to just nip my top choice, Dr. Scheibel. I was a bit bummed there because I could have won much more money on the Breeders' Cup if Dr. Scheibel would have held on. Just missed by a nose. Aloha West was able to rally and get the job done there. Now, a long-term angle that I like when I play these Breeders' Cup sprint races at 6 furlongs on the main track, horses breaking from posts 1 through 3, and especially the inside post, they struggle because, and typically if they have speed, because this race there's a lot of horses typically that have speed, and you're going to get a speed duel. And that's what happened last year. Jackie's Warrior was the 1-2 favorite breaking from post 2, got in a speed duel and weakened and didn't finish in the top 4. So keep an eye on that. If you have a contender that's a real speed horse, or if multiple speed horses are in posts 1 through 3, we're going to most likely see a fast pace, and a horse could rally off the pace to get the job done. So that will wrap up this first look at Breeders' Cup Saturday, and I'll be back and I'll do a second look where I'll look at the remaining Breeders' Cup Saturday races for 2022 and some of the trends and things to look for. So until I see you again, good luck at the races.